What's up everyone and welcome to another episode of Kelvin's Garage. Today we have a very special episode for you. We are going to change out the wheel bearings on the 2006 Honda Civic. Now over 250,000 miles of driving around is going to take a toll on these wheel bearings, especially if you are not adamant about doing your wheel alignment like me. How do you know that the wheel bearings are about to go? Well, first of all, the car will pull to one side or another, all right? So you'll feel that gentle pull, okay? That could be an alignment issue, but over time, like I said, the alignment issue will give rise to premature wear on the wheel bearing. Second of all, you drive around in the city a lot, you hit lots of potholes, you also park. When you park, you hit the wheel against the curb, okay? All these little things take a toll on the wheel bearings, all right? Now, the second main symptom of the wheel bearing is you'll hear it, all right? So as you drive down the road, you'll hear this constant grime, this constant hum of okay? So that is definitely a sign that the wheel bearing is about to go and that you need to change it out before your wheels fall off, literally. I don't know if you guys will be able to hear it, but first of all, you try to drive straight, and for my car, it pulls to the right, all right? The Civic just pulls to the right, you know, whether I like it or not. Okay, I'm not changing the steering wheel. Okay, I'm pulling to the right, okay? And that's just what happens to it naturally, all right? Okay, if you just let the car cruise, you might hear the grinding sound. So I'm gonna step on it a little bit, then I'm gonna let the car cruise. Basically, it's just like this constant hum, okay? You'll hear a constant hum of the wheel just going. That is the wheel bearing. Going about 59 right now. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a pretty constant hum and kind of a pulsating sensation, especially near the floorboard. So these are the loaded steering knuckles, okay? A pair, okay, from AutoShack. Okay, the part number is KN798453 and KN798452, and as a pair they are KN798453PR, okay? So you buy them as a pair, they're available on Amazon. And the great thing about these knuckles is that they're fully loaded, okay? What does that mean, okay? So let's take a look here. Here's the packaging. All right, here it is, okay? Look at this beefy, beautiful new part here, all right? Here is the entire knuckle. I just took it out of the bag, and look, has everything pre-assembled for you, okay? It's got the hub, okay? It's got the wheel bearing, which is inside of here, okay? So you don't need to mess with that, all right? Everything is pre-built. And this heavy-duty piece of machinery is just there waiting for you to install, okay? So just take a look at the quality here. I think it's pretty good. A lot of reviews on Amazon, all right? We can see them both here, all right? Now, the only thing about these parts here, the AutoShack loaded steering knuckle, is that the price changes, okay? So the price changes quite a bit. So depending on what week, what time of the year you're looking at it, okay, they can change wildly. So originally these were, I think the list price is like $203 something, 99 or something. Sometimes it goes down to $197.95, all right? Sometimes it goes down to as low as $145.63. So if you check today, it's early July, it's $145.63. Now they also come with the spindle nut, okay, brand new spindle nut, okay, and that goes on the spindle here. Okay, we'll need that to reinstall this entire assembly. All right, so what are we doing today? Okay, so I went to my favorite website again, okay, civic.hondafitjazz.com, okay, and here are the instructions, okay? So if this is all you're looking for, here it is, all right? Let's take a look here. We've got the front knuckle hub replacement, okay? You can see here, we've got all the parts, okay, of the front knuckle, okay, and the hub, okay, and the brake disc, okay. So this is basically the assembly, and we can use these references for the torque, okay, for the torque and for all the nut sizes and so forth. All right, so let's take a look here. Special tools, we don't need these, okay. We've got our own special tools. All right, we don't need to use the Honda tools, okay. But basically, let's take a look here, okay. We got raise the vehicle, okay. Remove the wheel nuts, okay. Remove the wheel. Okay, remove the brake hose mounting bolt, okay? Okay, and here the back of the caliper. We're gonna remove the caliper, all right? Remove the caliper. Remove the caliper bracket mounting bolts, okay? Remove the wheel sensor, all right? That's it right there, okay? Raise the stake, so that's the spindle nut. Okay, we're gonna take the spindle nut off right here. Okay, we're gonna punch that out. Okay, take that off, and then we're going to remove the brake disc. Okay, that's how to remove the brake disc. And then we're going to take off the, we'll check the front hub. We don't need to check it because we got a new one. Okay, but then we're going to take off the ball joint. Okay, so we have to take out the cotter pin, okay, and the castle nut. Okay, and we're going to use our ball joint separator to remove that. Okay, and then we're going to remove the ball joint itself entirely, okay, from the control arm. All right, and then we're going to remove the strut bolts, okay, and then the whole knuckle should come out. Okay, then you just pop it off of the axle. All right, and that's it. Okay, you pop out the axle, and the rest of this procedure I'm going to show you is how to remove the wheel bearing. Okay, so fortunately we have the loaded knuckles, okay, with the wheel bearing pre-installed. Okay, so we don't need to do all this, okay, but look at how much work that we bypass because of these newer parts that are pre-assembled, these low-cost parts from China. Okay, you know, we don't have to have a press. Okay, we don't need to put this thing in a vise. Okay, we don't need to take the bearing out and drive it out and all this stuff, take the snap ring off. Okay, we don't need to do all of this stuff in the rest of this procedure here. All right, so one of the first things I would do is to check the torque on the wheel, okay, on the wheel lug nuts, because there's a possibility that your wheel came loose. Because if the wheel is not properly torqued down, it could make noises that are very similar to a wheel bearing failure. All right, here are some of the tools that you may need to do this wheel bearing knuckle assembly job. Okay, I've got a 32 millimeter, okay, socket. That's for the spindle nut. Okay, I've also got the 3/4 inch, okay, 3/4 inch socket. That's for the lug nut. Okay, I've also got a variety of other ones here. I've got a 10 millimeter. Okay, this is a 10 millimeter. I've also got 17 millimeter. Okay, I've also got 19 millimeter. I've also got 12 millimeter. Okay, and I've also got a variety of the same in wrenches. Okay, when we do the assembly, it's easier to do with the wrench, or in some cases normal wrench. Okay, I got 17 millimeter right here. Okay, I've got 19 millimeter right here. Okay, I've got pliers, got a screwdriver, Phillips. Okay, I've also got our normal socket, right? Socket and whatever adapters you might need. Okay, I've got my Bauer brushless 20 volt cordless impact wrench. Now this is very important. Okay, so it turns out that some of these, the torque on some of these nuts are very, very high. Okay, they're virtually stuck on there, and I can't tell you how helpful this is. Okay, so I highly recommend using this. You might be able to do it without it, but I doubt it. Okay, so especially the spindle nut is very, very strong on there. Okay, you'll need some wheel bearing grease or some kind of grease. Okay, it's not actually for the wheel bearing. You're just gonna apply a little bit on the axle when we reinstall. We'll need some WD-40. Okay, that's some lube there to help things get lubricated and moving, some of these stubborn nuts and screws. Okay, we'll need a breaker bar. Okay, I use my breaker bar frequently. Okay, that's to do any kind of hand tightening, hand loosening. Okay, especially with some torque spec. For the torque specs, I use the Quinn. Okay, my Quinn digital torque gauge. Okay, torque gauge. Okay, I have the wheel bearing, sorry, the ball joint removal tool. Okay, I don't know if you guys remember this one. I used it in the control arm episode. Okay, our modified because I grinded the inside of this right here. Okay, modified ball joint removal tool. Okay, and a hammer. Okay, we'll need a hammer, we'll need a mallet. Okay, and we'll need a variety of screwdrivers. Now, I'm not really using these screwdrivers as screwdrivers, I'm actually using them as punches, but something like a pry bar, okay, with a very hardened end to it. Okay, optionally, you can have a piston compressor for the brake caliper. Okay, that's because when we disassemble the thing, it's easier to get back on if you're able to compress the caliper a little bit without having to totally undo the caliper, brake caliper, open it up, and then you know, readjust the pads and so forth. A heat gun might be useful. Okay, so there are some stubborn screws on the brake rotor. Okay, and maybe a heat gun would help a little bit there. Okay, I also have a hook. Okay, hook. The hook is for hanging the brake caliper on the strut tower assembly on the spring. Okay, that's so that we can have the brake caliper out of the way without causing any grief, okay, while we do the job, all right? And I also have here a punch, okay? This is actually very important. Okay, some kind of punch, okay, hardened. Okay, and what that does is that opens up the spindle nut. Okay, there's a little punched area in there, a locked punched area, and we have to unpunch it out with a punch, a hardened punch. A final item is to have some kind of adapter assembly to use a Phillips screw bit, okay? And that's because it's kind of a pain removing these brake rotors. You may need to use the impact wrench, okay? So in my case, I use the impact wrench. Made things a lot easier, okay? Without stripping the threads on the screws. Jack up the car, loosen these up a little bit. Okay, and then once we've got the car on the jack stand here, I recommend only jacking up one side, okay? Only jack up the side that you're working on, because that'll give some traction on the other side so the wheels don't spin freely, okay, while you're working on it. But we can make our life easier, use the impact wrench, or just do it by hand. All right, and take out the wheel. All right, and if the wheel's a little stubborn, you can give it a kick or two. And there it goes. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is remove this brake line, the mounting hose. Okay, the hose mount. Okay, remove our 12. Okay, so what we'll do next is we're gonna remove the entire caliper, okay, just the whole thing, okay, and we're gonna hang it off of the strut, okay, using the hook, okay. But first thing we need to do is identify the two screws, okay. In other words, we don't need to open up the caliper and take the pads off and so forth. You might want to do that when you reassemble later, but for now we don't need to do that. So if you notice, I've turned the wheel all the way to the right, okay. This is the passenger side, okay. And if you go back here, you can see that there's a nut right here, this one right here, okay, that needs to be undone, all right. And then there's another one down here, okay, right over here, that also needs to be undone. What we can do is we can take our hook, okay, so I'm gonna get our hook and I'm just gonna get it ready, okay. So I'm gonna hook it right on top of here, okay, one of these, maybe this one right here, okay, and get our hook ready, okay. We're gonna thread one of the holes of the caliper onto the hook. Okay, so these two are a little bit stubborn, all right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the 17mm on a breaker bar, okay, like so. You could probably get it with the impact wrench, but we have the breaker bar, so let's just do that instead. All right, so just like that. Okay, there we go. Change the angle, you guys can see a little better. Just pop that open as well, okay? Here we go. Okay, all right, so broke that free. Okay, and after we unscrew these two bolts, we should be able to take the entire caliper off. Okay, so let me just get this bolt off here. Okay, and then the upper one right here. You could use the pry bar, okay? Kind of wiggle the caliper off. Okay, like so, see? From the top and then from the bottom, we'll wiggle it off. Use the rotor as leverage. Okay, and it should be floating by its brake hose, okay? So be careful with the brake hose. That's why I said we have this hook here. Okay, so we're gonna wiggle this off like so, okay? Be careful not to get your fingers caught up in there, okay? And then just hang it on the hook here. Just like that. Okay, you see that, guys? I just took the hook, I just hung it just like that. All right, now we're gonna take off the wheel sensor, okay? The wheel sensor is this cable right here, okay? And it runs right here, okay? Now some people on YouTube said that it's a little difficult to take off, and I didn't have that trouble, okay? But basically we're just gonna remove this nut and pull the wheel sensor right out. Okay, so with the 10mm, just come in really easy here, okay? And take that off. Okay, take off the bolt here, okay, be real careful with it. But as soon as you take it out, I think if you're in a dry environment, maybe if you're in a wet climate, it's different. But this wheel sensor just comes right out, okay? So, see? Comes right out, voila. So I'm gonna hang the wheel sensor over here, okay, just so that it's out of the way. Okay, I'm just gonna hang it along with the brake line, and it doesn't dangle while we work on the rest of this. If you take a look closer, this is the spindle nut, okay? And this basically holds the axle to this wheel hub, all right? axle to the wheel hub. Now the thing is, if you take a look, it's got this little punched in portion, okay, and then you've got the nut itself. So what we need to do to remove this nut, okay, and it's very tight on there, okay, is actually remove this punched out portion first, okay, and then take the spindle nut off using the impact wrench. Basically, we're gonna use our punch, okay, this one, and our hammer, okay. So we're gonna have to go at this with our punch and hammer. So we'll take the punch in here, the little pointy part, and we're gonna basically punch this part out. So just take your hammer and punch at it, but be careful not to punch anything else or hit anything else with the hammer, and be careful not to hit yourself also. You guys see that? It's coming out. So just work it out. Don't worry about damaging the spindle nut, because the new knuckle came with a new one, okay? So we're not gonna reuse the old one, so just feel free to destroy it in the process. Wiggle it around, change positions of the punch, and keep on going. Okay, so the punch is a good tool, okay? It's hardened, okay? So maybe it's bending. It shouldn't bend too much. So that's why we have to use an official punch, okay? It's made for this job here. But we've pretty much punched out as much as we can, okay? Let's take a look right there. Okay, you see it's been punched out. Should be able to freely move at this point. Okay, so we got our really big Pittsburgh branded, okay, from Harbor Freight also. 32 millimeter, okay, socket, okay, impact, okay, hardened steel, and our Bauer. And our Bauer, we're gonna set it to maximum power here. I would recommend squirting a little WD-40, okay, just around here, okay, around this area here, where the spindle nut meets the rest of the axle, okay. But take some WD-40, squirt it in here, okay, the mating surface here, and maybe just let it penetrate for a little bit. It will help. Okay, we've got our impact wrench ready to rock. Okay, we have it on high power setting. Let's give it a shot here. Okay, see that? See how cool that was? The spindle nut is officially removed. Okay, set that aside as a little trophy. Okay, so the next part of this is to remove the brake rotor, okay? In order to remove the brake rotor, we have to take off these two screws here. So these actually, they may appear that they're not doing much, but since it's been sitting here kind of frozen for so long, it does take some effort to remove these, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go with some WD-40 on them as well, let it soak, okay? And then I'm gonna use the impact wrench with the screwdriver tip to get these off. Okay, if it's a little stubborn, you can try to knock it with a mallet before you try to remove the screws. Just knock it with a mallet. You can even use a hammer just to kind of break it from its location here. The idea is to break it from here and here, okay? Now the idea behind the heat gun is, of course, to heat this rotor, okay? So it's expanded and cooled so many times that it's kind of frozen, okay? But if you want, you can take the heat gun. I put it on the maximum setting here at 1000 F. And just kind of heat these areas like that, like this. Put it on there for 30 seconds or so, okay? Make sure the thing is expanded, contracted, kind of loosened in its place. So that's the key idea. So I've got my screw bit here, okay? It's actually being connected to a 1/4 inch, okay? So usually these screw bits are just a 1/4 inch. And then I got my adapter here, which will go to the other adapter to the impact wrench. The great thing about the impact wrench is that you can actually, for the screws, right, you can actually put your body against it, okay, so that the screw tip doesn't lose traction here, okay? That's the important thing. Put the screw tip deep in there, okay? Put force against it, okay? In that way, okay? And then that way it can do its job properly. All right, hopefully we can get this off here. What I did, I just put the lug nuts back in there. Maybe that'll give it some tension against the hub here. Because here we go. All right, Mayday, we have a problem, okay? So what I did is I put the lug nuts back on. I also heated up these areas. Okay, I got this little grinder attachment here. This seems to be working on this stripped screw, so we'll just keep at it with this little tapered grinding wheel, and I think the screw will be gone in just momentarily. Alright, so let me show you what I did to save the day. So I drilled this out as much as possible. Okay, you can see that. I drilled it out, grilled it out, grinded it out, and then I used the two holes here, these service holes here on the rotor, okay, which allow me to put a 10 millimeter bolt in there, actually 12, okay, 10 but then 12 on the head, okay, and I was able to screw this down. It puts force against the back of the hub, or behind the rotor of the hub, and pulls it outward, okay. So now it's starting to go loose. If I tighten this even more, it'll put pressure, it'll pop the rotor off. So basically that's how we'll do it to remove the rotor. We won't replace these screws when we reinstall because we'll have to get new ones, and also, as I said, they're not as big a deal as long as these are properly torqued down, the lug nuts. Okay, but it looks like the rotor has now been loosened anyway. Okay, so we don't need to use the other screw here. Okay, so this bolt was just our brake line bolt, okay? Just use it for service here. So now we can pop this thing off. It looks like it's moving. Okay, you see that? I'm taking whatever's left of this grinded out screw, just using the plier to gently, at this point there's no more force on it because this is freely moving. But you see the screw is basically dead at this point. I can just pick it out with my plier. Things happen sometimes. You have to be kind of prepared for the inevitably worst possibility, okay, which is, you know, you strip a screw or something like that. Okay, the car's like 20 years old now, so. Okay, after a little finagling with my pry bar and the mallet, I managed to dislodge the rotor, so take the rotor off and set that aside. Okay, now we are on the tie rod, okay, the joint here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove the cotter pin and the nut which holds it in place to the tie rod, okay, the steering tie rod. Alright, I turned the steering wheel to the left so we have a little more room to work with. But basically just take this off with a plier. And we can reuse this. It says don't reuse this, but I think it's okay to reuse this. These cotter pins. They're pretty malleable. And I mean, that's their purpose, right? To be malleable and lock in this nut here. But I'm gonna do this. Okay, then I'm gonna pop out the pin here. Okay, there we go. Okay, with our 19 millimeter, we're just gonna get it on there. Use the impact wrench. Make a quick job of this. Don't mind the rolling soda can. Okay, and off that comes. All right, set that aside. So let's try this first. If this doesn't work, we'll use the separator tool. Okay, that worked good. Okay, that worked good. Now the reason why I prefer this method is I don't have to insert the separator tool. What the separator tool does is it will actually damage, it could damage the rubber here, okay, the separator tool. Okay, so yeah, the hammer was pretty good, it worked well. So yeah, you guys just whack at it, all right? If you whack at it, it'll come off. Okay, that was fantastic. All right, so what I did is, even though I knocked out the tie rod, okay, the steering tie rod, I gently put it back in, and I put the screw back in. That's so that we can still use the steering wheel to turn this assembly, okay? So I put it back in. I'm gonna turn the steering wheel all the way to the right, and that way we can get the ball joint castle nut, okay? It's easier to get from the other side, so we're gonna do that right now. Okay, we're almost done with this assembly, but I want you guys to take a look here. I've turned the wheel all the way to the right, and if you take a look, that's the castle nut, okay, for the ball joint, for the control arm. And if you look at our ball joint, okay, this is the ball joint that came with the Moog control arm. Okay, they're not in good shape, all right? Look at it, the rubber is all torn up right here, okay? Basically, this is open. Okay, so later on, eventually, we're gonna have to replace this ball joint, okay? It's not in good shape right now. But for now, we're not gonna do that. All we're gonna do is focus on replacing our knuckle. Okay, but if you take a look here, we're gonna take the castle nut, the cotter pin, which I installed on the castle nut some time ago. Try to get this thing unwrapped, basically. But there we go, actually. Okay, so I kind of did it right there. Okay, so the angle's a little funny, but I'm able to straighten out the cotter pin and pull it out. Okay, see, like that. Okay, and now we just have to take off this nut here. Okay, I believe it's a 19. We'll get our 19, okay, and we're gonna take it out. Let's just knock this bad boy out with my foot. Okay. All right, that's it. That's it. Okay, the castle nut is out. Okay, right here. Okay, we're gonna have at it with the ball joint separator tool now. Okay, just get in there like so. Okay. Okay, just like that. Okay, and with the pressure on, I did load the suspension a little bit with the jack underneath. Okay, but in this position, it should be good to go for the ball joint separator tool. You know, it's a little complex because we've got the castle nut still on there. Okay, but don't put the ball joint tool part on top of the castle nut. Put it on top of the bolt. Okay, if you take a closer look here, that's what it looks like. Okay, the fork is in between this area right here, the ball joint. Okay, and then the top of that fork is on top of the ball joint, the threaded part. Okay, just tighten the ball joint separator tool. It should just pop. Okay, there we go. Ball joint is now unlocked. It's now unlocked. And let's back out the separator tool a little bit so that we can remove it from its position. Take the tool out. Okay, voila. There it is. Ball joint is separated. Okay, even though we were unable to remove the castle nut after we popped off the ball joint, that's okay, because what will happen is that once I undo these two knuckle bolts, okay, this thing will have freedom of motion, and I can just lift it off together while unscrewing the castle nut. Okay, we're gonna undo this with the breaker bar now. 19 on this side, 17 on that side. Okay, here we go. Good old breaker bar works great. We're gonna go with the breaker bar on this side. Here we go. Okay, good old breaker bar. I'm taking out these nuts, these bolts. Alright, so at this point, this knuckle should be pretty much free. We can kind of wiggle it out here. Now, a very key thing here, okay? Remember, we removed the spindle nut, okay? So when we pull out the knuckle assembly, do not also pull out the spindle, the axle, okay? Because the axle is actually attached here. And what will happen is that if you pull this out, it'll actually pull it out on the transmission side. Okay, so we need to actually hammer this. Be careful when you take this out. We have to hammer this to loosen it up, okay? Like that. Okay, we loosen it up. Also on this end, on the inside end, you can pry it off like so, okay, without causing too much damage here. Okay, just pry it off. Okay, but this should not be affected here. If you look over here now, you see there's more room now for the castle nut to spin off. Okay, so because I separated this a little bit, so the castle nut can come off now. Alright, so here's a moment of truth. Pull this out and up. Okay, and like I said, keep the spindle against the transmission, just like this, okay? You see that? And then keep the spindle together with the transmission. So put force against it. Okay, and we've removed it. Make sure this is still pressed against the transmission. Okay, don't pull this out. Okay, so set it aside in such a way where it doesn't get damaged. Okay, so that's it. So we've officially removed the knuckle. Check that out, okay? Officially removed the knuckle in its entirety. And now we are ready to prepare for the reinstall. All right, let's do a little side-by-side between the old and the new, okay? So verify that the new part is correct, okay? We take a look at the old hub here. So we've got, it says R, okay, so this is the right side. Ours also says R, okay, it says R right here. It's kind of hard to see, but there is an R right there. Okay, and just to make sure, okay, remember, See, this is where the caliper mounts, okay, to the knuckle assembly, and this is where the caliper mounts. And take a look here, this is where the knuckle mounts to the strut assembly. Okay, right up here, right up here. Okay, the only thing here that you have to remember to do is the hardware is transferred properly over to the new one. Remember, this is the wheel sensor bolt. Okay, so just move that over. Other than that, there's nothing that I left on the knuckle that is going to be needed to transfer over. Okay, this is the back of the bearing here. So we can take a look at all that crustiness. Okay, maybe it's going bad, maybe it's not. Okay, it's hard to tell, but it is quite old, so probably it is bad. All right, and here's the new knuckle. Okay, the new bearing, the new knuckle. Okay, take a quick look here. Compare the architecture. Okay, the new piece is pretty beefy, you know. The old piece is nice, of course. The new piece is also nice, I would say, at least from the looks of it. Okay, so let's put it on. Let's move on. So installation is pretty much the reversal of the removal. Okay, the only thing we really need to do is just clean up a little bit. Okay, so some of these parts should not be so greasy, and they actually shouldn't have grease on a lot of these sections. Okay, now the ball joints should not have grease on them. Okay, they should not have grease on them. So one of the instructions is to make sure you degrease them. I have my fancy wipes here. Also degrease this one here too. Okay, other than that, there's not much to do here. Okay, I'm just cleaning up a little bit. Gonna put a little grease on the spleens. You can use a good old finger like that. Okay, but I just got my wheel bearing grease. Gonna spread it all over here. Okay, but not on the threads. Okay, be careful, do not put it on the threads. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put the knuckle, okay, I'm gonna string it through, simultaneously string it through here, put this part through the ball joint here, and kind of line up the top mounting points with the strut assembly. The easiest way that I found to do this is first put the ball joint part first, okay, because the axle is actually pretty flexible. Okay, it's very flexible, moves around quite a bit. Okay, I can even move around over here. Okay, but put this part on top first, okay, like so. Okay, and this kind of bends outward, right? And then you can take the CV axle assembly and string it through like so. Once that's partially strung through, then I'm gonna line it up with the strut, okay, above here. Okay, got the lower one loosely done. Now it's time for the upper one. Okay, the lower one was easier, so do that one first. Okay, so the spindle, I thought it was in there, but it wasn't. Okay, now it's in there. As you can see there, it actually has some play in there. Okay, so I'm pushing in from the back. Okay, you see? There's some play in there, okay? Until you tighten it down with the spindle nut. Okay, now we're gonna retry the upper knuckle bolt. It should be lining up properly now. Okay, move the caliper out of the way and put some forward pressure. Okay, and the bolt is now through. Get it through. Jiggle it through. Okay, so we got that lightly through. We got the lower one lightly through. Okay, and all we need to do now, make sure all the pieces are lined up, and then we're going to load the suspension and torque it all down. All right, so you can see here the nut. I'm just going to loosely screw it to where it needs to be about, but then stop without torquing it. Okay, same thing with the upper one. Put that nut on the bolt. The caliper should still be freely doing what it's doing. Okay, so with all the following nuts in place, okay, the castle nut, okay, final check, okay, these two nuts here in place but loose, okay, and the steering tie rod nut. Okay, now we're gonna jack up the suspension, put a load on it, and then we're gonna torque it down to specs. I'm gonna jack it up right behind the ball joint, okay, where the two nuts and the single bolt connect. Okay, I'm not gonna jack it up where the actual seal of the ball joint is. Okay, we don't want to damage the backside of that seal. Okay, we could cause grease to leak out and so forth. All right, but now we're gonna jack it up pretty good. Okay, When the car starts lifting off of the jack stand, that's how I know that it's being loaded, okay? So I'm gonna keep going here. Okay, it looks like it's being loaded. Okay, it looks like it's being loaded pretty good right now. 67 foot-pounds, all right? So if I need to, I'm gonna put the 17 wrench on the other side here, but I don't think it's gonna slip too much, but let's just do it anyway. So just tighten it, torque it to 67. Okay, 67. And then we'll do the same on the top one here. 67. Here we go. 67, okay, stop. Now for the ball joint, okay, and the tie rod ball joint, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna tighten it with a wrench. Okay, just with a wrench. And then, because right now it's loaded, so I'm not gonna turn the steering wheel all over the place. But yeah, I'm just gonna tighten it with a wrench. You know, it may not be exactly the torque it needs. Okay, this is 51 to 58 on the castle nut. 51 to 58, okay? We're just gonna do the best we can with that. All right, but right now I'm just using the 19 millimeter on my castle nut for the ball joint, and should be tightening in it pretty good. So according to the instructions, never loosen the castle nut so that that little opening lines up with the hole. Only tighten. So you're supposed to torque it down and then tighten it. Now we're just going to, again, like I said, approximate and then tighten. Okay, and now that we have the castle nut where we want it to be, you can see the hole right there. Okay, we're going to string through the pin, the cotter pin, through that hole over there, through the other side, and wrap it around. Okay, stringing through the cotter pin here. Okay, just take your time, bend it around as it needs to be bent around so that you can get it to where you need to go, and then wrap it around. All right. Okay, so we just finished bending the cotter pin around. So I know the instructions officially say it has to be a certain way, but it doesn't really need to be, okay? The idea is that it wraps around and it locks in, and it will prevent this thing from flying off. So yeah, just get it around, wrap it around, whatever way you think is suitable. Okay, for this one, the steering tie rod joint, okay, this one I believe is 40. Tighten it down by hand first, then we're gonna use our torque wrench, try to get 40. All right, next we're gonna put the new spindle nut, okay? The new spindle nut that comes with the knuckle, okay? We're gonna put it on there. I don't know if you notice here, but I rotated this up so that it points up, okay, this little notch here, and that will help me punch it in later, okay? Okay, so here's the brand new spindle nut, and it says put a little oil on the back side of it, okay? So don't go too crazy with the oil. Just a little bit on the back here, okay? So then when it torques down, it'll torque nice and strong. Do not get it on the threads, okay? Do not get it on the threads. Okay, so we're gonna hand tighten the spindle nut, okay, onto the spindle, okay? And then we're gonna torque it down. Now, this one's a big one, all right? This one's 134 pound-feet, 134 pound-feet, okay? So that's a lot of force right there, right? But make sure this thing is mated first, okay? And then we're gonna grab our breaker bar and our 32 millimeter. All right, so let's put 134 on this bad boy. 100, 100. 117. 125, 126, 134, just about right there. So now we need to hammer this little edge here, this little lip, into this point right here, okay? So that way it'll lock this spindle nut in place, just in case anything ever happens, okay? You hit a bump or something, this thing will be solid, okay? So we're gonna take our hammer, we're gonna just hammer this in just like that. You can see I'm already doing it here, okay? Hammer it in, I'm just gonna keep going, and I'll show you the finished result. All right, check out that spindle nut, which has been hammered in, and I think that's pretty good, okay? That should lock it in place for good, even in the event something happens. Remember our brake disc, all right here, okay? We had our little issue with it, so we do not have the screws, okay? So I'm gonna I have to drive out later tonight, so I won't be able to put those screws on until I order some new ones. All right, so we're just gonna have to cross our fingers. But probably it's okay, because remember, it's the wheel and the bolts here that hold it in place. It's gonna flop around like this just for now, but once I put the wheel back on, it should be okay. Another thing we can do is that when we install the caliper, we can just hold the rotor in place with the lug nuts, okay? That way the caliper will go on and fit nice and snug. And the wheel sensor should go on nicely inside the hole, just like that. Okay, put it in the hole. Okay, and then screw it down here with the bolt. Okay, but this is very simply a 10 millimeter. Okay, tighten it down. Just ever so gently. Okay, now we're gonna take our hanging caliper and move it back in its place. All right, and you can see here, these are the holes in the knuckle. Okay, the new knuckle. All right, so once these threaded areas here slip behind this, okay, this is gonna slip behind this, we'll be able to bolt it down. Now it's a bit tricky to take the caliper as it is because it was under some kind of pressure here. It's a little bit tricky to slip it back over the rotor, okay, but it is possible, okay? You might have to use some extra force. Now, if you really don't want to do that, what you could do is you could open up the caliper, okay? You can use the caliper compressor, the piston compressor I just showed you, okay? Give it some more room and then slip it over, but we're gonna try to just slip it over, see if we could do it. Okay, taking out the caliper from the hook, unhooking it, and making sure it kind of fits on our new knuckle. I might have to spread open the pads a little bit, okay, but let's see if we can get it over. Okay, I think we got it over. Okay, I think we got it over. So if we need the rubber mallet, we can kind of make an adjustment on it. Okay. But the loaded caliper, you can pretty much reinsert right on top, okay? Like so. And then, if you need to, you can move it up and down, see? And get the bolt through it, okay? And I'm getting the bolt down here, okay? I was able to thread it through without an issue. Okay, hand thread it, and that should give me some alignment on the top one. And it is also threading through okay. Now these bolts here are a little bit, have stronger torque, okay? So you need to torque these down quite a bit. So for these, they're 79.6 pound-feet, okay? So 80 pound-feet basically, same as the lug nuts, okay? These are 17, okay? Come in with the breaker bar and the torque wrench and give it 79.6. 50, 60, 70, 9.6. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, finally we just need to put the brake line bolt back on, the mounting bolt. Okay, there is also a torque spec for this one, but I think if you just securely tighten it, it should be acceptable. Okay, this is 12 millimeter on top. Just tighten it firmly, like that. Okay, it's not going anywhere. And don't forget to take the hook off, okay? I still had the hook up there. Take that off. Alright, and finally put the wheel back on. Wheel back on. Alright, and our lug nuts, hand tighten the lug nuts. And then we're gonna torque them down to 80. Torquing down to 80 pound-feet. 80. Alright, don't forget to take it on a test drive to make sure that you're not getting any unexpected behavior. Make sure the brakes and everything work okay, everything sounds smooth, you're not getting any weird noises and so forth. And yeah, just test it out, make sure that everything is solid. Alright, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Kelvin's Garage, and if this was helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more tips and tricks on maintaining your car and your Honda Civic. See you next time.